Hey everybody, welcome to another video. This is your old pal Digger Jones, and I thought I'd do a little follow-up on my last video that I put out right before the game dropped. I enumerated the reasons I would not be ascending, and just to give you a quick recap, I kind of stand by all of those things. In fact, most of those things that I said were true then, they continue to be even more true now. Quick review, and if you're watching me play The Lost Island, playing it on my server here, and I'm using the Primal Fear mod. But I'm recording the audio separate so that I don't drone on and get distracted by what's going on the screen. But this will give you something interesting to watch while listening to me. I had 5 reasons. Number 1 was that it was the same game. Essentially, same gameplay. After watching a whole lot of my favorite creators coming out, it is pretty much the same. A lot of good improvements, though, especially in the building. That seems to be a big thing. And the dinos, the look and feel are definitely an improvement. And it's brought a lot of people are interested in it now, which is good. The second thing I said was the no cryos and no speed thing. That was a real turnoff for me. Still are, but a lot of you in your comments said that the no speed would be a good thing. And I guess I can see your point there, and it looks like they've upped the speed anyway, the base speed for everybody. So maybe it won't be such a huge deal having speed turned off. The no cryo thing, eventually, either through a mod or the release of Extinction, that'll be kind of rectified. But just to clarify, I'm not going to be ascending now or in the near future. But I'm not going to say that I will not be ascending sometime down the road. My benchmark is 1 or 2 maps, additional maps get dropped. And by then, they should have all this stuff worked out. Stuff like the third point that I had was the bugs. Now, as far as bugs go, I'm going to include the performance things in that, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But everybody's had problems with that. It's early release. Those are going to happen. And then the Nitrado deal, there's been a huge blow up about that. And everything that I said about that before still applies. Certain things like private servers and running your own clusters and stuff, that's gotten a bit sketchy, but the jury's still out on that, what that's going to be. But everything I said before about it is still valid, if not more so, because you're still paying more an ASA Nitrado server than you would be for or Ark Survival Evolved Nitrado server or a G-Portal server or whatever, and you're stuck with Nitrado. And then number 5, the fifth thing I had was wildcards. Terrible marketing. I stand by that. You drop a trailer and a few hours later you drop the game. I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but oh well, there it is. So yeah, those were my 5 reasons, and I stand by all of those. Let me get into a few things, specific things. Let's get into some of the comments that you guys left me last time. That was my best ever video, so thank you guys for watching it. Thank you, those of you who gave me some likes. Several of you gave me some dislikes. Usually I'm 100% likes, but that's only because I get like 3 of them, and they're all likes. You guys did register your opinions, and I appreciate it, and I value your opinions. Let's talk about one of the main, kind of the funnier ones that said, one of the reasons I wasn't going to buy it, why buy a game that I already have? So people concluded, well, you must be broke. Well, I prefer to be referred, I identify as being resource impaired, okay? And my pronouns are rusty, crusty, and musty. I value my money, I work hard for it. Of course I'm going to try to save some. But that gets on to some other aspects of the game that people brought up. One of the things that people and I admit when I put out the original video, I wasn't thinking of console players very much at all because I'm not one. So out of sight, out of mind, right? Because up until now, you hadn't been able to, console players and PC gamers hadn't really been able to play alongside each other at the same time. So the friends that I played with were all PC gamers. So never thought about that. So I could see why you guys would be in favor of this. However, if you look at the implementation as of today, console players are still waiting. So those of you that thought you were going to play day one with your friends, and there were a lot of comments to that effect. They were looking forward to playing with their friends. They're still looking forward to it. So again, that's a sore spot. Another sore spot is the mods. A lot of console players were looking forward to the mods, and I think they're going to have some. Some is better than none, but not all mods are going to be available to the console players simply because of the memory requirements. Which leads me to one of the biggest issues of this game so far. And this is something that came out in the comments again. A lot of you said, well, the only reason I wouldn't buy this is if I didn't think I had enough specs on my machine. And this is an issue. This is definitely an issue. I'll share with you my specs. I have a Ryzen 5600X with an AMD Radeon RX 6600 GPU, 16 megabytes of RAM, and it's on a B550 Plus tough gaming motherboard. So, looking at my specs, and keep in mind, I built this rig a year ago, thinking that this was going to be I mean, I always knew I was going to add on to it. That's why I built it the way I did. But at the time, with the gaming that I was doing, it was more than adequate. But it doesn't even meet the recommendations, the recommended levels for ASA. And so that's been the biggest thing that I've seen in all of the gameplay that I've watched is that a lot of people are going to have to upgrade, and I'm going to be one of them. So I'm not going to buy this thing until I can afford the upgrades. Now, looking at the specs on my rig, you'll notice I got a Ryzen and an AMD, which a lot of people don't consider sub-optimum hardware. But there's a reason why I did it that way, because I also sometimes like to game on Linux. And let me just mention a few things about that in relation to Ark. Ark Survival Evolved was one of the first and best games to port itself over to Linux when Steam put out its Steam Deck and enabled Linux gameplay. And I actually did play Ark for several months on Linux, and it ran really good with the Proton and everything. There was really, in fact, I would say it ran maybe a little bit better than it did on Windows. I mean, that was just objectively, I couldn't give you any hard numbers or anything on that, but it felt like a better experience, or maybe I just felt better about it. But that's because on this particular motherboard, I have two NVMe slots, and so one was for Windows and one for Linux. Well, the Linux one, somehow that crapped out, or that SSD gave out, so I went back over to Windows, and I stayed with Windows, and I haven't replaced that SSD yet. But that was another reason why I built my rig the way it is, and that's why I still can see myself sticking with Ark Survival Evolved for a little bit longer, because if I need to, I can still play on Linux. Can't do that with ASA yet. It's really early days on this. So I guess the short answer is that I'm not going to be playing it anytime in the near future, but I may down the road. But here's an exercise for you, and this just came to me while I was shooting the video for this. I asked myself, I was wondering, what did what were the settings that I was running under Ark Survival Evolved? I never even thought about it. I mean, I just played the game and I enjoyed it. So I went back in and I discovered that, all the stuff that you guys have been watching, those of you that have been watching my series, it's all done under the medium settings. And so that gave me cause for pause. So I went ahead and I cranked up to the ultra settings just to see what would happen. And sure enough, my graphics card really spooled up and got pretty loud on that. And that's on Ark Survival Evolved. So those of you that are still playing Ark Survival Evolved for whatever reason, maybe you're a console player and it hasn't come out yet, or you're still holding off for whatever reason, I encourage you to go back into Ark Survival Evolved and crank your settings all the way up to Ultra, and see what happens and see what you notice, because that's kind of the benchmark I think that might be helpful. Is if your rig can run Ultra settings on Ark Survival Evolved, then you might have a chance to play Ark Survival Ascended under their maybe low to medium settings. That's just what I'm thinking. I mean, if you look at my specs are higher than the minimum, but much, much lower than the recommended. That was kind of a light bulb moment for me, that I thought, even though I don't have Ark Survival Ascended yet, I still have the capacity to try out Ark Survival Evolved settings, cranking those all the way up, seeing what my performance is. And to be honest, I will say that when I did that, it felt a little janky, but I was looking at my frame rate and it didn't seem to be affected. I was still at 60 FPS the whole time, but it felt different. And so at some point during this video, you'll see where I go across the plains and it looks a certain way, and then I go back across it again a few minutes later, across the same terrain essentially, under the higher settings. And I don't know if you guys can see the difference either. Let me know in the comments if you could see, if you knew at what point did I crank the settings all the way up from medium to ultra, because I couldn't really tell that much. And while you're doing that, notice the island map definitely did need an upgrade. It needed some TLC. So Ark Survival Ascended, of course, it really looks good in that environment. But if you compare that to, say, Lost Island is the most recent map, other than Fjordor, that's comparable. You could see that map was upgraded from the island by many orders of magnitude. So when you're comparing Ark Survival Ascended, a lot of people like the denser foliage and the movement and things like that, and those are things that aren't in Ark Survival Evolved. But you could just see that the map was, for Lost Island, a much bigger upgrade compared to the original island. I mean, the original island, is 8 years old. 8 years older than Lost Island. So those are just some thoughts. Thank you all for chiming in and giving me a fun time, probably the funnest time I've had doing YouTube in a long time. And I will be back to my regularly scheduled stuff very soon. The next month will be fire, to quote Wildcard. All right, everybody, take it easy, and we'll see you on the next one.